Good morning. It's the Driveline Academy podcast. I'm your host, Devin Morgan. This is my co-host, Jeremy Techteal.
Hello. Good afternoon.
So we're going to do this show under a 24-esque time block in order to condense this information into like the most effective use of your time and ours as possible.
That's a really nice way to say to stop us from talking too long.
Yeah. That's the generous way of like shutting myself up.
Yeah.
Probably is what it means. Yeah. Today we're going to talk about high intent throwing. It's really important. There's a lot of stuff to cover. 35 minutes? Can we get this done in 35 minutes? Is that too aggressive?
It wasn't for Kiefer Sutherland.
Done deal. 35 minutes. Go. We're on the time clock. Okay, so let's talk about high intent throwing. So we started posting this week on our Driveline Youth socials some of our kids that had their first assessment bullpens. Mm-hmm. What we mean by assessment bullpen is after 6 weeks at like kind of the minimum, kids are finally getting on the bump for the first time, getting a chance to just like see how hard they can throw.
Yes.
Related to this, we are also tracking whether they're throwing strikes or not. Not because that's kind of the intention of an assessment bullpen, but more to just get a baseline for us as well to kind of understand what we're starting with, right?
Well, I'll correct that a little bit. Okay. We're not tracking strikes. We are tracking competitive pitches.
Good clarification.
Because that they are not necessarily the same thing.
Yes. And if you want to get in the minutia there, dangerous with 1 minute gone already, but consider the hitting environment for youth players, right? A lot of them don't have a like perfect, who's like the best don't swing outside the zone guy nowadays at the MLB level. Juan Soto, very, very good. Max Muncy, very, very good. Like guys that have that are not, they don't chase a lot, right? You don't see a lot of that 18U on down because that's a developing skill. You certainly don't see a lot of it 14U on down, and you certainly don't see a lot of it 12U down.
Well, even if it's not a developing skill, it's for the hitter. It's a developing skill for the pitcher.
Yes.
And like it's not fun to just get walked all the time.
100%.
If you're going to have like a really discerning eye, you probably aren't going to get a whole lot of strikes that you feel good about swinging at. Hitters at a younger age are going to expand their zones to meet where the pitchers are at, and not for nothing, where the umpires are at in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So we run an assessment bullpen that tries to look at both of those things, right? What does kind of our velocity look like, and what is our ability to throw a competitive pitch look like? So that stuff starts going on. It starts going on social media. It's December, right? So people see our kids throwing off the bump in December at 100% intent, and they have questions.
Questions? Is that
yes?
Comments?
Generous. Yeah, they have thoughts and feelings.
The peanut gallery is loud.
Yeah, they have thoughts and feelings. And not that I think it would be valuable for us to turn this show into like let's read comments on the internet. I do think that this is a subject that requires a little bit of context and explanation. We typically try to put that out consistently and constantly. Like, Youth High Intent Throwing blog is on our website. You can read that. It might take as long as this is our 35-minute episode takes because there's a lot of stuff to go into it. But we've got you here now, so let's like talk through it, right? Yeah. So whether you do an assessment bullpen, whether you're doing plyo velocity, whether you're doing pull downs, all this type of like high intent modality of training is something that we only put our toes in that end of the pool until we've checked some boxes first.
Yes. Which doesn't, that gets lost in, we have some culpability here, right? Of like, we want to put out content. And we want people to watch that content, and no one's going to watch like a half an hour video of us explaining how we on-ramp kids to the point where they get to throw an assessment bullpen. It's much more fun to just let them throw the assessment bullpen on content. So like we put out a 10 to 20 second video, And we are opening ourselves up to get yelled at, lots of stones thrown at us, whatever, because we didn't preface it and explain it with, hey, unlike your kids who threw fall ball, and we're throwing way more than we, and by this way, this assessment bullpen is 10 to 12 pitches.
Sure.
10 to 12 pitches. Football, they're throwing way more than that. And I'm not showing up to fall ball games, sitting in the stands, yelling about kids throwing balls and strikes and, that fun stuff. And we spent our fall ball season on-ramping the kids and taking them from zero to finally the first time they got to throw 100% was this assessment bullpen 7 weeks after they started the program.
Right.
Because we care about the arm health of these kids. And we're not going to let them throw an assessment bullpen without having properly ramped up.
Right. And to break down that concept, I think a little bit more further, this whole idea of a ramp up is something that, we probably want to spend a couple seconds of our very precious time talking about. The whole idea is, the way that I try to explain this to parents a lot of times is like, have you done like the Couch to 5K? Have you done like the Road to 100 Push-Ups app? If you do any of those type of things, because I'm not presuming that I can communicate this to like a 5x5 strong lifts type of thing, right? If you do either one of those things, right, either building up kind of your tolerance for push-up volume or your tolerance for like longer duration conditioning activities, the way that you do that successfully is not jump first into the deep end of the pool and hope you can swim. That's not an effective training strategy. What we want to try to do is, like, again, slowly over a period of time, gradually build up intensity and volume. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about on-ramping. On-ramping doesn't mean throwing a bullpen at week 2 and week 3 and week 4 at week 5 and week 6.
Right.
It means we gate that activity by like the 6 to 8-ish weeks, kind of depending on the kid, of the progressive buildup of stimulus that precludes that.
Right.
You cannot participate. And actually, and to this degree, in the academy this year, we actually gated the assessment bullpen against attendance. Like we literally went one level deeper, not just say, okay, well, our 13U or 15U or 18U team, you've been in the building, we hope, for 6 weeks. Now we're going to get a bullpen on you.
Yep.
We track individually where these players are, and there's some of them that met that threshold for participation, which, because we know the throwing program that we're doing, puts them in a place where they can healthily get through that.
Right.
And there are other players that didn't.
Right.
They'll get there later.
Right.
But the whole point of like this very progressive on-ramp is that, like, you have to build back into that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that we're building into, again, is just like competition intensity. So if you see a video of our kids where they're throwing an assessment bullpen and they're throwing hard, and you're like, well, how dare you? What do you think it looks like when that kid is on the bump in April?
Right.
They're throwing with intent. Like that is what the game demands. I understand that people kind of look at this type of stuff, and you're right. We are culpable to the degree that, if we put out a video that was like, let's say it's a minute long. Well, it's probably already 30 seconds too long for most social media content.
Yes.
And if the first, I was watching Kev on Stage on Instagram the other day, and he is very smart about the way that he weaponizes his social media. And he's like, look, people make the decision about whether you're going to stay on your page or your account to see that content within 3 seconds.
Yep.
So imagine the first hype content that we have at the Academy is like, it's 30 seconds of like 60 to 70% what we would call like a hybrid B throwing volume, right? Like, nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
You have to understand, though, that in the background, that is the thing that gets us to the place that we land at, right? It's just like, is that consistency of again, periodizing this buildup of intensity and volume that allows us to safely get there. And the point that we're trying to get to is not sending it on the mound at 100% the way that you will be in competition before you're ready to do that.
Right.
That's just not a thing. And so I think your point about like, yeah, we got here because we took time off. We got here because we periodized this buildup over time and we didn't play fall ball.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand that like the fall ball thing, saying that we don't do that is something that's a real sticking point for a lot of people. I get it, but it's all related to the same ball of wax.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just can't get into this specific phase of training, a velocity development phase, which starts with an assessment of where you actually are to begin with, right? You can't get there if you cross-pollinate all this other stuff.
Right. And that's the other part that you missed, right? Is like, what are we leading into?
Right.
And that is this velocity development phase.
Right.
That you really need to have arm health if you're going to take on some of these higher intent velocity workouts, which we do the same thing with both pulse data and attendance records with eligibility. Like if you, like in, this is a time of year where lots of kids get sick, flu's going around.
Oh boy.
COVID's going around again. So if they have to miss a week because they got sick, they're not eligible to throw in these velocity workouts. Because it's a high stress on your arm, right? Like you can train for, you talked about the marathon. You can train for 6 months for a marathon. The day after you run that marathon, you're probably pretty sore.
Yeah, you're still going to feel like you got your ass kicked.
Yeah. So that's the same thing with these velocity workouts, with pull downs, thing like that. Like we do all of this preparation to lead up to it. And like, we had this conversation with a lot of these athletes this last week after we did our pull downs, that it's okay to feel sore. Like you should feel sore. That's how you know you did a high intent workout. Right. Like you really got after it. If you don't feel sore, maybe that means you didn't stress your body enough. Yeah. You didn't really, the stimulus didn't like impact you enough to like really make your body feel that workout. But it's like what led up to that video and then what happens after that video. Where like that video was a 10 to 12 pitch bullpen. After the on-ramp, it was the first time we allowed them, we took the brakes off, we allowed them to throw 100%, first time all year. They got after it, they had a ton of fun, which is the biggest thing that I think people are missing with that.
How dare you.
Is they had a lot of fun, which I know, having fun playing baseball is just like, we should quit.
We're not here for that, dude.
This is not good. But then it was to on-ramp, here's your 10 to 12 pitches where you can have some fun, let it eat, you've earned this after that slow buildup of a 6-week on-ramp. And then it's, okay, now here's where you're at. And now we're going into a 6-week velocity development phase where you're going to get into some really high intent workouts. And we set goals with all these kids based on those assessment numbers from that bullpen. So like that is the social media world we live in, where like it's really easy to take something like that out of context, see one kid throw one pitch and say ball. Or whatever they want to say. That's one. He told me I had 6. I was allowed to say ball 6 times in this podcast. So those 2 don't count.
No, those are off the record.
But I mean, it's like really easy to look at that and just come to that conclusion. The same way it's like really easy to see a big leaguer hit a home run and come to the conclusion that like he's just really good without like watching the hours and weeks and months of work he put in to lead up to that home run.
The work that gets done in the dark. And so I want to go one level deeper on what you're talking about like stress, because that is something that we got to probably provide a little bit more context in. But before that, I do want to point out the fact that, again, the way that we build up progressively to the point that you can throw an assessment bullpen means that first number that we get, I would say, is real.
Yeah.
Which is different than us going, let's throw a bullpen in week 1, where you're just coming off of shutdown, which runs the risk, number one, that you are asking your body to do something that your body is not able to tolerate doing safely. And 2, even if you get through it safely, those numbers are diminished because those numbers are coming off of a shutdown. Right. So when you see us later in this year posting velocity development numbers, understand what's the fidelity of that signal, I think, is very high, because we're not sandbagging what we're doing at the beginning. Sandbagging is like a car racing thing to like act like your car is slow, and then you have like a 200 shot of nitrous in the trunk, or whatever. The number is real because of the way that the process that we go through to obtain it, which means that the development that comes from that point might be mitigated a little bit, right? I mean, if all we wanted to do was go like, hey, every kid in our facility is going to gain 20 miles an hour in a year, the easiest path to like do that in a very scumbaggy way is to get bad numbers early at low intent, and then compare that number with a later number at high intent and be like, we're so good at this.
I guarantee you I can add 20 miles of bat speed in a week.
Sure.
Day 1, they swing the bazooka bat.
Yeah.
Day 5, they swing a drop 13. I am a great coach. I've added 20 miles an hour bat speed.
So good.
And like people don't ask, ask for like the parameters of like how did you come to these numbers, right? Like
sure, which is fair, but I think it does bear mentioning that, like, again, there is a health and I guess safety perspective for the way that we build up in that specific kind of roadmap from point A when you walk in the door to point B when we're actually going to get our numbers, because we aren't training college kids that are kind of like constantly throwing and constantly training, like on with the conventional, collegiate professional pitching and hitting floor. They don't have to do that process because those guys are just like constantly in season. Like despite what one of my favorite closers on the Phillies in the 2000s tried to tell people on Twitter this week,
Brett Myers was on Twitter this week.
Allegedly. I mean, well, shit, who cares? Yeah, he's trying to say, I wouldn't even start throwing. I would shut down when the season was over, and I would start throwing a week before spring training. And
Smart.
he was saying that is like, and that's the path. And again, this goes back to like Devin's old rant about why it's important to be particular and get context and signal about what MLB guys tell you, because like, if that's a thing for Brett Myers, to presume that is an effective and safe way for you to execute training for your child or your athlete is a little tomato potato, right? It'd be like, hey, I drink and drive all the time without wearing a seatbelt, and it's working just fine for me.
Yeah. Hasn't gotten, and I know there were injuries in Brett Myers' career, and I'm pretty sure if you looked at the year he retired, it was not at like a super ripe old age.
Yeah.
But like that's a very good point, and like the other part of what we do in here is like we extremely monitor
Right.
what, like, not just because kids lie, so like you can ask them how their arm's feeling, but like watch the actual throws and you'll know.
Right.
Like if you get a sense of your kids, you'll know when they're babying throws and then when they're letting it eat.
Right.
So like, yeah, we instruct our coaches to like go that extra level, and like what you didn't see in that video is multiple kids not throwing because like their arm was a little hanging that day. And like the thing we tell them every time before they throw, and this may, irk some people, but nobody cares how hard you throw in December if you can't throw in July.
100%.
Over and over and over again, we told them this.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to make sure they knew it's okay to have some arm pain or some arm soreness and tell your coach.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you like a bad team player.
Yep.
It doesn't make you soft if like your arm is not feeling great today. It does make you a bad team player if you try to throw through it and then end up with like little league elbow, little league shoulder, or something worse if, your body is a little more developed and you're actually throwing with some velocity behind it.
Which dovetails directly into this idea of like stress and force production, right? Like I will be honest, when Danny first started coming and we was getting like mocap data on him as like a 9, a 10, and 11-year-old, he I guess is a lot of times he's the athlete that I understand at the deepest level of fidelity, because
I would hope so.
I love all our kids. I only have one kid that is like, I think we talked about this, but like, there was this paradigm where like he would produce, we used to measure like mile per hour per varus, which is to say unit of velocity versus unit of varus stress on the elbow. And what I saw with him, and then I would like dig deeper into some other athletes we had around the same time, is this weird paradigm where it's like these kids would produce just like more and more velocity with minimal amounts of force increase. So you would go from like 14 miles an hour per unit of varus to 18 miles an hour per unit of varus to 23 miles an hour of unit of varus. I think the highest he ever got to was like 26. And I remember asking Anthony Brady about this, one of our R&D guys. Is like, man, there's no way this can continue, right? And he's like, yeah, it's 100% going to change, because eventually kids start to produce more force, which is like the next way that you get more velocity development, but it has to be force you can tolerate. So again, when you kind of think back about your exact point, there's no point in doing any of this in December if you're not healthy in June and July. Okay, the next level deeper to kind of understand what you're really getting at there is that what you're going to be doing in June and July is putting stress on your body. There is no mechanical panacea where you can throw good velocity for your age and not produce force on your body. Like, that's just not a thing, specifically with older 12, 13, 14, 15s, and certainly everything from that point. So if what we want to do is get through the competition in June and July in a healthy fashion, then you do not want the stress and stimulus you're getting in June and July in competition at competition levels of intensity be the first time you've experienced that.
Right.
That is how you open up the door for like getting screwed up. And again, think about this in basically like any other athletic endeavor, right? If I've never benched 315 and I haven't, and it eats at me at a near daily basis, if I'm building back up now, right, and I'm not there yet, and I just like go into the facility in here tomorrow, and I'm like, I'm going to put 315 on the bar. Best case scenario, I'm just going to get folded and it's just going to get stuck on my chest and it's going to be embarrassing. I've been there before. Worst case scenario, I could hurt myself because the demand that I have put on my body in that specific activity, I have not acclimated for.
Right.
The whole, and I understand that it's crazy, I think, maybe for parents that aren't that deep into this to kind of understand this idea, but that's why we're talking about it, right? Like, you don't, when you're on the bump and it's the third inning and you've had 35, 40 pitches in the can already, and you're going to go 65 or 70, there is going to be like a first time you're going to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The path does not go for like 20 pitch bullpens, February, March, April, May, 75 pitch starts in June and July.
Right.
Because that's the same. This is the same concept, right? You have to periodize this stuff over time. You have to progressively add and increase stress and stimulus. And everything that we're trying to do is simply be eyes wide open about what's asked for in competition and make sure that the approach to training actually reflects you for that and prepares you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. That's absolutely all of it. So that's the assessment bullpen, right? It's just like a very clear, this is where we are to start type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
From that, we move into a velocity phase of development. We got 13 minutes. We got plenty of time.
Oh, we're rolling.
We're rolling. And I think the thing I always think about when we start to get in these conversations is like the age-old baseball coach question: will it transfer? Like the first post that I ever had that did numbers on Twitter, and the thing that is pinned to my account now, is Danny and I doing side soft toss in the backyard of our old house. And there was this whole conversation that summer about like drills that transfer and what transfers, what don't. And it's like, moving the bat fast to hit a moving object is a skill that transfers. You can do it in less challenging environments or more challenging environments relative to the athlete, but all of that stuff informs your ability to execute that task in competition to one degree or another. Some of the stuff will have more transfer, some of it will have less, but to broadly like paint with a broad proverbial brush and go like, this thing is good and everything else is bad, is probably ill-informed. So pull downs, run and guns, what else does people call them? There's like 5 different. Why do we do them?
Drive lines.
Do the drive line, right? Do the drive line. Do the old, the run at the thing and throw. Okay. What do the best pitchers in the world do? Most of them use their whole body to sequentially generate force and execute the task. That means all the things that as coaches that we, put up on a pedestal, activating the glutes, staying in the back pocket, like all this other nonsense, right? The sum total output of doing that well is a sequence, right? This is why Kyle called it hacking the kinetic chain. You are using your biological kinetic chain to execute a movement, because we understand that the thing that we don't want is like the dart thrower.
Right.
We understand that. So the question is, when you're taking athletes, and I'll just keep this on our end of the pool, right? 18 and unders. If that's a thing that we understand is good, how do we get them to be better at it? Well, you have to put them in an environment that's going to drive them to find a sequence.
Right.
The whole intent of the pull down, the run and gun, whatever you want to call it, is an unrestricted environment where the athlete will self-organize their body around a very simple objective, which is throw the ball hard. And you get iterative feedback on that every single time about whether you achieve that goal or not. Then when you achieve that goal, you go, all right, that felt good. Lock, throw away. And if you didn't get that, okay, I got to do something different.
Yeah.
And I guess it shouldn't surprise me, given that in American baseball, we have like 100-year history of just prioritizing mechanics in abstract. I understand that. And it's very, very different than like, pull down is very different than, I'm thinking about like the Ron Polk baseball playbook, right? The idea that like he's literally like physically holding a kid's back heel on the ground while he's pitching. Yeah. I guess it shouldn't be a surprise to me, but again, by the same token, what we're talking about is something that's really, really hard to specifically drive an adaptation for, right? It's a complex thing.
Yep.
It's a complex thing that it's very hard to like say the right magical words to coach someone into. What we're talking about is like athletic movement discovery, not to get too hippy-dippy about it, but that's literally the thing. It's like, it's an environment that allows you to learn how to sequence. Is sequencing good? Yes. So how are you going to help them get better at it? You have to give them a chance.
I'll tell you, week 1 of pull downs, I love all of the children. It was so ugly.
Some of them were bad.
Oh man, some of these pull downs were just, and like part of it is like a really positive thing that we patterned into them, that like be mindful of your arm health, and like you don't have to always let it eat, and like that's most of the time you don't want to let it eat. Like you want to basically throw at 80-90% for the vast majority of the time you're on the mound. And then we tell them, all right, let it eat. Like just running start, let it eat. And there's like still, a gate that's in their mind that like there is like that first week stopped a lot of these kids from like truly letting it eat. And like we'll get there. But this is the movement discovery. Like every kid, no matter how ugly pull down 1 looked better by pull down 8, because we only do 8 pull down throws.
Which again, if you're having your kid through like 50 pitch, 70% intent bullpens every single week, like, man, what are we doing? Like you want to criminalize people that put kids in this type of environment for high intent throwing at low volume. Meanwhile, you are like constantly like just hammering holes in the Hoover Dam.
There's not a ton of difference. I mean, the momentum obviously is a big difference, but there's not a ton of difference from that and long toss.
Correct, and we know that because we studied it and we have objective data to just like
and like
prove
people
that.
Don't complain about long tossing, and they would do that 5 days a week.
Well, if I can interject, my son goes to a school with a friend of his who plays on another team, and he and his friend got to talking the other day, and his buddy was like, "Hey, the thing for velocity development, man, you just gotta do like max intent long toss every day." And my son reports this to me, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know, dog.
It's gonna be a no for me.
That's because again,
where's the recovery period?
Bingo. The whole issue with that type of approach, right? Whether it's the repetitive bullpen thing or repetitive maximum intent throwing like that, is that you are taking athletes away from an opportunity to get into the super compensation phase of training. Yep. Which requires rest and recovery.
Yes.
And
we could bring Connor on to really get into the weeds with the super conversation.
Yeah, yes. and so to your point, when we have 8 pull downs. The next 2 or 3 days or 4 days of training,
all recovery.
It's all recovery.
Yeah.
Right? We can have low volume and low intensity stimulus that gets us moving in a little, it's a little active recovery almost, right? But it's not eating away at our ability to actually recover and get the gain. It's different.
Yeah. And a lot of time, like we're I believe, past the point where you're going to be able to tell a kid, don't throw 95. Or, and like, these old adults can like yell all they want about how, like, you know, you should be able to throw 90 and locate. Kids want to throw the ball hard.
Yep.
They want to hit the ball hard. All of that, like the 5 daily max long toss, long toss.
Yeah,
Jeez
daily,
Christ.
dog. Yeah.
That I have to assume, there is no part of that where like a weight room or some dumbbells are being inserted into the process. So like, how are you actually making this kid stronger and allowing him to be able to produce more force to get those gains? And what ends up happening, because like the kid wants to throw 95.
Mm-hmm.
He's not any stronger than when he started.
Mm-hmm.
So he overcompensates by like trying to just whip his arm as fast as he can and gets injured. The amount of times in the past like month that I have had kids of all of ages, like literally I could pick out a time of 10 you said this to me and a time of 18 you said this to me in the last month. It's wild. I'm quoting now from these kids. Like, it's wild that I'm PRing and I'm not even swinging any harder.
Yeah.
I'm PRing and I'm not throwing 100% and I'm PRing. It's like, yeah, you're getting stronger. That's how it should happen.
Yeah.
Is you get stronger and then like you're not necessarily, your intent isn't going up.
Yeah.
There's a you know, as much as people think that you could say like 110%, 100% is the max of anything.
Right.
So like you can't get higher intent. You can't want it more.
Yeah.
And like that is when people get hurt, is like they just try to like will it to happen and don't spend any time in the weight room like actually learning how to produce more force.
And to layer onto that, the whole point of that approach is that, yes, when you're in competition, you probably are going to be existing somewhere like 80 to 90%. Let's say 85 to 90, right?
On a good day.
On a good day, right? You can raise what that 90 is, which is the whole point,
the whole point of this.
Of all of this, right? This is the rising tide raises all ships type of deal, right? And when you take the time to adequately address the skill side and like the systemic side, which is basically what you present as an athlete, what do you walk in the door every single day? When you address both of those things, you can get the maximum amount of development. If you don't adequately address both of those things, then you are just good luck. You know, like man, I hope it works out. So, you know, Danny's telling me about his friend and I'm like, yeah, man, I know my 13-year-old son understands this idea of super compensation because he has to suffer with me on these car rides. And like, we've covered this stuff. And again, if you're tracking any type of data, and whether that data is measured with a flippin' yardstick, or a pulse sensor or a pocket radar, if you're going through this like consistent high intense throwing stimulus, you're going to start see that lack of recovery eat into your output. But if you don't measure those things, either the distance or long toss or the volume of long toss or the output of long toss in terms of velocity, you miss all of that signal. And how would you know? Hey man, it's just me and my kid and we're on a field and he's 180, 250 feet away. I might not be able to discern that difference between 180 to 250 perfectly.
Yeah. Right.
And if I don't track it and I don't understand, our long toss distance today was like 175, 160. We've been up around 220 something. If you don't track anything, you miss the ability to kind of understand the signal that is being communicated to you.
It's right there.
You just miss it.
Yeah.
You just miss it. So 1 minute, 51 seconds.
Okay.
In summation, we can hold to our Kiefer Sutherland goal for this podcast. High intent throwing is something that is good because it is going to allow you to learn how to effectively sequence as an athlete in an unrestricted environment in a way that informs the movement patterns that you express when you're actually in a competition environment. Mm-hmm. It is a difficult thing to learn, but is a thing that can be learned. Mm-hmm. You don't do that safely until you have adequately prepared yourself with consistent and periodized stimulus over time. And the whole point of adapting to that stimulus, both in terms of an assessment pull down, assessment bullpen, in terms of an actual pull down, is also reflected in what competition demands. Our sport is a high intense sport. That's just the way that it is. And even if there is a period of time where it is played in low intensity effectively, right? This is like the 10U kids. Hey, just throw strikes because most 10U hitters are going to get themselves out. That's fine. That shit doesn't play at 15U unless you just want to be serving batting practice.
Correct.
So, if you want to learn how to throw hard, you have to do the things necessary to get that benefit safely and effectively.
Yep.
And again, to hit the last point there, addressing the systemic, right? Addressing the ecological. What do you bring to the table as an athlete in terms of your physical preparation for nutrition and rest and recovery? Where are you in terms of like general athletic strength and sport specific strength? You just have to address all of it. And like, you know, at the end of the day, man, you know, my kid,
That's it. At the end of the day, my kid.
At the end of the day, my kid is effectively like doing baseball year round, right? But doing baseball year round does not mean playing in perfect game tournaments every single weekend. It can mean different things relative to the way that it's implemented. And if you just take the time to track any of this stuff, you can see the benefits that you gain and then realize that like you just want to do both, right? You want to build skill, you want to play the game. There's a way to balance those two things against each other. You just have to be a little smart and burn a couple calories.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it's easy.
No, it's like
complicated. I'm not going to say it's easy. But like if you care, you take the time to figure it out.
Yes.
And we've got some resources to help you figure it out.
Yes. Put my paid shill hat on. Here's a free thing you can read. Our Youth High Intent Throwing blog has like, I don't know, 100,000 views or whatever. It's got a lot of, I think it's okay. Start there. If you want to have an idea of what like this periodized increase in throwing volume and throwing intensity looks like, we have a free program to like walk you through a 6-week version of that. If you want to have guidance from that, our Academy online program for a very affordable number, less than you're going to spend on like showcases for your kid this year, is going to give you monthly support and guidance from our trainers, so how to do that stuff. We have a new like composite educational book that'll be coming out to like wrap all of this in one single bundle. I will make it as easy for you as possible. You just gotta like be a little intentional.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the health of your child or the team of children you've been tasked with, that intentionality shouldn't be something that's like a big ask.
100%.
Unless you want to exist in the non-feedback land, the old man yells at cloud land. And I don't even want to, I want to do like the Twitter.
But it's not even non-feedback, right? Like there's feedback there. It's just stupid feedback.
Yeah, it's very stupid feedback.
Right.
Yeah, it's very stupid feedback. The thing I love this morning is like hitting the ball hard is bad. Kids shouldn't get feedback on their swing output. That's the new thing that's floating around this morning from everybody's favorite troll. So like
my decision to stay off of social media just wins again.
Yeah. So like just realize, man, I hope that if people have have the ability to kind of see this thing for clear eyes, I think some of those people that are so visceral against this type of feedback, man, you can't convince me that isn't just a fear response. It's a fear driven by irrelevancy or irrelevance, right? Like, well, what power do I have an instructor if my kids get this feedback that I used to have power over? But that's a tangent for another show. All right. It's the Kiefer Sutherland edition of the Driveline Academy podcast. We have more meetings and stuff to get to. Again, like we have a ton of free resources you guys can dive into. We'll link them in the show notes. Throwing hard is good. You got to be set up to do it safely and effectively, and then you're going to get the benefit, and then your kids are going to have fun, and it's tight.
Oh, they have fun. We should have said that more. And I only said ball once.
Yeah. In the spirit of the World Cup, this is our bonus time.
Oh, there you go.
It's also just fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. And if you think that like, okay, we can go back and forth about does it transfer and that all just stupid reductive conversation. It's also just kids like to move fast.
Yeah.
I trust me, they do. I've been doing this for a while.
And they like to beat their numbers.
100,000%.
Yeah. It's really simple.
Yeah. In the words of Michael Scott, it's a win-win-win-win.
Win-win-win.
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 Win-win. All right. Bonus time is over.
Ball.
We only got 3. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be here next week, and we'll talk more about some of the stupidity that we find on the internet and why we can embrace that and actually tell you how to do something a little bit smarter.
That sounds like a good plan.
All right. We'll see you guys. Ball.